Good afternoon. My name is Niels, and I will be your host for this afternoon session. You are in the theater, and the breakout session for this hour is titled, A Census Was Taken, Opportunities for the Church Created by Recent Immigration to Canada. Before I introduce our presenter, I want you to know this session is being live streamed to our satellite sites in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and BC. It is also available to everyone who has registered and downloaded the Mission Fest Manitoba app. So please know that your image may appear on the live stream broadcast. And if you don't absorb all the content in this session, the video of each session will be available after Mission Fest is over on our YouTube channel. Our presenter today is Rick Love. Rick Love is the director of Love New Canadians, a ministry that has worked with 432 churches and ministries in 8 provinces of Canada and 16 countries around the world, helping churches develop pathways to Jesus for immigrants in their neighborhoods. For those of you that were coming in, I was handing out a paper, so once I hand the floor over to him, just let me know if you didn't receive it. So for now, please give Rick a warm Mission Fest Manitoba welcome as he comes to present.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks, Nels. It's great to be back in Winnipeg. I'm pastor of intercultural ministries at Foothills Alliance Church, as well as directing the ministry of Love New Canadians. My great-grandfather immigrated from Ireland to an area near Portage la Prairie. My grandfather was born there, so that's as close as I get to Manitoba roots. My wife, my lovely wife of almost 40 years, she is from Brandon, so we just love coming to Winnipeg. I wanted to show you my family. I have 4 kids, got 7 grandkids, and we work with Love New Canadians. I asked Nels to pass around a clipboard. We'd love to know who's here today, so if you don't mind giving me your name and the name of your church, that would be so kind of you. If you'd like an email, include your email. If you'd like my newsletter, just put a check mark. There's instructions on the page. Thanks so much for doing that. So for the rest of our time together today, we'd like to talk about immigration to Canada and how the church can respond to connect with our new Canadian neighbors. World population growth peaked at 2.1% per year in 1968, and since then has ebbed. So now it's about 1.1% per year is the growth of the population in our world. The United Nations in November said that we've now hit 8 billion people, 8 billion humans. This population, people disagree, the people who do the math disagree. Most think that the population will peak somewhere between 9 and 11 billion, somewhere between 2050 and the year 2100. There's various factors why the population growth is decreasing. The main ones, trends in a decreasing fertility rate, the growth of women's rights, the growth in women's education, life expectancy, and the big wild card is the last one, how population will increase in Africa. It's very hard to guess that one. The fertility rate in Canada is now 1.4, meaning that the average woman in her lifetime will have 1.4 babies, average woman in Canada. The highest fertility rates are found in the world. The 10 countries with the highest rate: Niger, 6.8, Somalia, Congo, Mali, Chad, Angola, Burundi, Nigeria, Gambia, Burkina Faso. So the 10 the countries with the highest fertility rate are all in Africa. These are 3 countries whose fertility rate was around 6 only a few decades ago, but for various reasons has decreased. Pakistan has decreased to 3.5, Philippines to 2.6, and India, surprisingly, now has a fertility rate of 2.2. Countries like the USA, Germany, and Canada have population rates, fertility rates lower than 2.1. So 2.1 is what you need to maintain your population for various reasons. These countries are able to, though they have a low fertility rate, they're able to grow through immigration. There are a few of the many countries whose fertility rate is very low, including China. Just 3 weeks ago, the National Bureau of Statistics in China announced that their population declined by 850,000 in 2022. That's the first time since 1961. So the population in that country has declined. Japan, Italy, and Spain, all in crisis because of low fertility rates. And the lowest in the world that I can find is South Korea at 0.9. So because Canada's fertility rate is 1.4, most of our population growth comes through immigration. So up until recently, I've never found any government person who actually said this, but a few months ago, Federal Immigration Minister Sean Fraser said, immigrants will help pay for schools, hospitals, and sustaining basic social services as the Canadian population ages. So the government's been planning this for a long time, but now they're actually saying it out loud. The reason they're emphasizing immigration is for economic growth and to pay for federal and provincial services. So I'd like to take a few minutes to summarize some of the immigration changes that we've experienced in Canada. Most of this data comes from the 2021 Canadian Census, which was released in October of 2022. So this is focusing on immigration from 2016 to 2021. In that time period, about 1.3 million new immigrants settled permanently in Canada. That's the highest number in any 5-year period in our nation's history. And 23% now of Canadians are foreign-born. So it's, again, the highest level. The 1920s, were a significant time of immigration to Canada. So you see some of the numbers in terms of various times in Canadian history, the percent of population that was foreign-born. So 1921, very high, then it was decreasing, then it started to increase again in the last 16, 17 years. The Statistics Canada estimates that in 2041, the foreign-born population in Canada could be as high as 34%. Not surprisingly, the 3 countries with the most number of immigrants coming to Canada in this 5-year time span are India, Philippines, and China. And you can see the numbers there. Philippines and China flipped in terms of second and third compared to the previous census. Fascinatingly, 18.6% of all immigrants to Canada in that 5 years came from India. Second was Philippines, and then from China. When immigrants come to Canada, the majority end up in Ontario. So you see the numbers, 4.2 million people in Ontario are immigrants. BC's next. And then Manitoba. Manitoba has over 250,000 people who were not born in Canada. Provinces chosen by immigrants to Canada. So if out of every 100 immigrants who show up in Canada, 44% end up moving to Ontario, and most of them end up in the GTA. So that's why well, there's all sorts of things going on in Toronto because of this. Quebec, BC, Alberta, all pretty close in second, third, and fourth. Manitoba, about 4.4% of new immigrants end up coming to Manitoba. Here's a list of the percentage of immigrants who make up populations in various Canadian cities. So not surprisingly, the number 1 is Toronto. That's not the GTA, that's Toronto proper. 46.6% of people there are foreign-born. Vancouver's number 2, and Winnipeg is 5th. 25% of people in Winnipeg are foreign-born, according to the 2021 census. So as you see, Toronto has the highest percent of foreign-born residents in Canada. There's one large city in North America with a higher percentage of immigrants than Toronto. Can you guess which city that would be? Not New York. Say louder. Los Angeles, no. As soon as I tell you say, of course. It's Miami. Miami has 56% of the people in Miami foreign-born. And there's one suburb of Miami, 77% of the people are foreign-born. Here's some of the numbers of how immigration is growing. So it's been around, plus 200,000 for quite a few years, got up to past the 250 mark, and in 2013, it's up to 263. We hit over 300,000 in 2016. 2020, numbers went down a little bit because of COVID, but then 2021, You see the number, 2022, 431,000 new Canadians arrived in 2022. And then the federal government's goal is 465,000 this year, 485,000 the year after, and then that 500,000 number. Perhaps you saw that in the news media. So imagine this. If this happens, it would be like adding a city the size of Winnipeg every 20 months. New Winnipeg every 20 months, all of immigrants. It would be like doubling this, it would be like all the population of Manitoba every 3 years. That's where our government, that's where our nation is heading in terms of immigration, in order to pay for the bills. I just put some of the numbers for those who are interested. So most of the plans for the federal government is, most would be economic immigrants, then family, 24%, then refugees, 15 to 16, and then a category that's called humanitarian. In this census, there were 218,000 refugees who were in Canada and still in Canada at the time of the census, and about half of those came from 5 countries. So the number one was Syria, followed by Iraq, Eritrea, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. The number of refugees coming to Canada has fluctuated. The peak had been 40,000. That was surpassed in 2016. It's bounced up and down. In 2022 and then following, the goal is around 75,000 is what our federal government would like to do in terms of number of refugees. We also see a growth in international students. So in the year 2000, about 114,000 international students, and that number has continued to grow, so that by the time we get to more recent, it's actually harder to get more recent numbers because, let's see, the Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, that's one column there, and Global Affairs Canada, different column. So they don't agree on the exact number because it depends on how they're counting. But you can see that in 2021, as of December 31st, 2021, there are 621,000 international students in Canada. We can also look at this through the lens of language. So about a quarter of Canadians, about 9 million people, grew up in a home where they were speaking something other than English or French. And about half of those, or 4.6 million, continue to speak a language other than French or English at home. The city in Canada with the highest number of those speaking a language other than French or English is Vancouver. Vancouver and Toronto are 1 and 2, but Winnipeg is very high. 15% of people in Winnipeg speak a language other than English or French at home. This chart will show the languages. So the number 1 and 2 is Mandarin and Punjabi. Over 500,000 people speak these languages in their homes in Canada, followed by Cantonese, Spanish, Arabic, Tagalog or Filipino, Urdu, Russian, Korean, Persian, Portuguese, and Vietnamese. We can also consider the percentage of people speaking at home a language other than English or French by province. So do you want to guess the place in Canada where they speak, has the highest percentage of people speaking a language other than French or English? You want to guess? Not Quebec, not BC. As soon as I tell you, you go, of course. Nunavut. 42% of people in Nunavut speak a language other than French or English because of all the Inuit languages, right? But you see BC is number 2, and Manitoba is right near the top. 13% of people in Manitoba speak a language other than French or English at home. I'm not sure if you're interested, but there's been a lot of research of people exploring how Canadians feel about this. So this is from the Environics Institute. 58% of Canadians agree Canada needs more immigrants. From the Angus Reid Institute, immigrants are taking our jobs. 71% of Canadians disagree. From the Association of Canadian Studies study, they found that 75% would agree, I'm concerned the immigration surge will affect our future. So the two things people are most worried about with immigrants coming to Canada are housing and healthcare wait times. So all across Canada, we have housing crisis and we have healthcare wait times. And so if you add 500,000 new people each year, doesn't take much with the math to figure out that's going to be a problem. So these are the issues that our governments are going to have to figure out. Just a side note, an economist at the University of Calgary named Arvind Magasan, he pointed out that on average, immigrants pay $10,800 in federal taxes and on average receive $7,800 in federal benefits. It's actually much more complicated than that, but it's a very interesting observation. In terms of religion, we've seen drastic reductions in the percent of people who affiliate with Christianity. So 2001, 77% of Canadians affiliated in Christians. So they're ticking off some kind of box that indicates a Christian connection. And that's dropped to 53% in 2021. Whereas no religion, some kind of secular response, it more than doubled, up to more than a third of Canadians. And then other religions have almost doubled. Okay, so now there's 53% of Canadians who affiliate with Christianity. You want to guess which province has the lowest percent who affiliate with Christianity? It's not Quebec. Any other guesses? BC, number one. Oops. Oh, did I skip that? Oh, okay, I missed some slides. Okay, so this just shows the increase in Muslim population in 20 years. It's doubled, more than doubled. 5% of Canadians are Muslim, and then about 2% are Hindu or Sikh. Sorry for doing that out of order. So BC is only 34% of people in BC affiliate with Christianity. 52% of people in BC affiliate with no religion at all. And the percent with other religions is 13.7. Many provinces are kind of in the middle, and that's where Manitoba is. So Manitoba, 54% of people in Manitoba affiliate with Christianity, 37% with no religion. And the province in Canada with the highest percentage of people who affiliate with Christianity is Newfoundland. 82% of people in Newfoundland view themselves as Christian. And then here's the cities. We can break it down by cities. So the three large cities with the highest percent who affiliate with Christianity are people in Montreal, Ottawa, and Winnipeg. Winnipeg, about half the people. But see the numbers, how they've dropped. All three of these cities are very high, but they've dropped significantly in the last 20 years. Edmonton, Toronto, Calgary, all in the middle. And then the two lowest, Vancouver and Victoria. 32% of people in those cities see themselves as Christian. So what can we do to help those who are new to Canada so that they move along a pathway to Jesus? At our church in Calgary, we've created a ministry for new Canadians that consists of 3 parts. It's a pathway for intercultural ministries. Stage 1 is classes and events that help new Canadians settle in Canada. These classes have little or no spiritual content. It's for those looking for friendship. Stage 2 is the transition from stage 1 to stage 3. It's a general introduction to the gospel for those who are curious about Jesus or Christianity or the church. Then stage 3 are the spiritual classes for those who want to follow Jesus or who are looking closely at what it would mean to follow Jesus. It consists primarily of ESL Bible studies, Alpha, church worship services. So this pathway is designed for our new Canadian friends to move from stage 1, then to stage 2, and on to stage 3. So in my mind, stage 3 is what churches do, evangelism and discipleship. So stage 3, evangelism and discipleship. So stage 2 is the pre-evangelism, and I don't know what to call stage 1, so I'm calling it pre-evangelism. Okay, all the names and all the pictures, the names don't match the people and the pictures don't match the people for various privacy reasons. So Sam began attending our ESL classes about 2 years ago. And he started with a stage 1 class, like a conversation class. He went to the stage 2 ESL Bridges class, then stage 3 ESL Bible studies, and even Alpha. He's attended more than 100 of our class sessions. Like many from his birth country, when he first started coming to our classes, he was an atheist. In classes where we'd talk about the Bible, he would often say, and I've heard him say this like 8 times in an hour, "I'm not a Christian." That's the first part of every sentence. One day in class, he told us about a Christian man he met in an airport, a stranger who bought Sam an air ticket when he had no cash and couldn't use his debit or credit cards. And this experience had a big impact on Sam. He's not yet a believer, but he told us that one of the highlights of his life was attending the Alpha course. Nancy and Joe are immigrants to Canada who've had difficulties in their marriage. We met them we met many like them whose marriage is stressed because of the challenges of moving to a new country. They live close to our church building and started attending some of our ESL classes a few years ago. One day, Nancy told us that her husband had been hitting her. So this led to a visit to the police station, the police report, a home visit from the police, as well as counseling. One of our volunteer couples went to visit Nancy and her husband, Joe. They were able to have a clear and honest conversation that included strategies for things both Nancy and Joe could do when they were having arguments. So intriguingly, through the grace of God, Joe's spiritual interests started to grow. He attended Bible studies, the Alpha course. He's now a follower of the Lord Jesus. He talks like a Christian. He prays like a Christian. And understandably, Nancy has been cautious and waiting to see how his newfound faith would affect Joe in the long term. Last year, the two of them were baptized together. We were so happy to hear this, so happy. So Nancy told us recently their marriage is so much better than it was. We continue to pray for their spiritual growth and marriage happiness. And we're just so thankful to God for the work he's doing in this immigrant couple. Our goal with the settlement classes is to meet the needs of immigrants in our neighborhood, to help them settle into life in Canada. We provide services that result in people in our neighborhood coming into our church building, getting to know Christians who show love to them. We started with one ESL class. We had 5 volunteers and 2 students, and every week we weren't sure if anyone would show up. And as we've grown, we've been able to add many other ESL classes as well. So we have various conversation classes, ESL classes for beginners, intermediate and advanced student, ESL for weddings, ESL for art, ESL for home repair, ESL novel study. This semester they're studying The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is a perfect book for that class. ESL for music, a guy with a strong music background was teaching a different genre of music each week. Hip-hop, rap, Christian music, classical, musicals, pop. I like to tell people I like both kinds of music, country and Western. Some of our other classes include ESL cooking and baking classes, ESL creativity classes using art therapy activities, exploring issues through collage, painting, and music. There's a weekly women's ESL class looking at famous women in our world. It works well, and it's a favorite of some women who prefer attending a class where all the teachers and students are women. Recently, they were looking at Benazir Bhutto, and they did a class on Agatha Christie. So that's just samples. A citizenship course. For those who want to learn about the history and geography and government structure of Canada, we do an employment course to help immigrants with resumes, networking, interview skills in the Canadian market. There's immigrant transitions class, normalizing the emotional challenge of moving to a new country, new culture, and a new language. Other stage 1 classes include an ESL public speaking class. We found it's a fantastic way for students to improve their English speaking ability. So basically it's Toastmasters for those learning English. And we designed it as an intermediate class, but we opened it up to beginners a few years ago, and it works well for them also. Our Living in Canada class helps new Canadians learn about finances, parenting, healthcare, and education in Canada. We do monthly parties, farm trips, camping, curling, hiking, Easter egg hunts, banquets, potlucks. For 5 years, we offered a regular gym night, ping pong, badminton, basketball, volleyball, games of crafts, movie nights, scrapbooking club. So basically, any idea that we think of, we try. Some work, many do not. People come to these classes and events because they want to learn. They want to find a job. They want to make friends. Some come because they're bored or lonely, perhaps just curious about what happens in the church building. Many have told me that coming to one of our classes was the first time they'd ever entered a church building. So when our immigrant friends feel comfortable, when they find the activities helpful and enjoyable, they're very likely to come back and to try other classes and maybe invite a friend. In Leviticus 19, God said to the people of Israel through Moses, "The foreigners living with you must be treated as one of your native born. Love immigrants as you love yourselves. Remember, your people were also once immigrants in Egypt. I am the Lord your God." So we begin with settlement programming as a way to treat immigrants like we would want to be treated. We found that one of the important aspects of the settlement classes is the need to be patient. We try not to force spiritual conversations. We're comfortable spending weeks, months, and sometimes many years getting to know our immigrant friends as we trust the Spirit of God to draw them to Himself. Recently, one of our students expressed amazement that the teachers from the church ESL classes want to be her friend. Our ESL classes provide an entrance for meeting our immigrant neighbors and becoming friends. We would never limit our contacts to those who want to follow Jesus at stage 3. One volunteer recently said to a student, "You know, even if you don't follow Jesus, you'll still be my friend." And we're happy serving people at stage 1, the friendship stage, while trusting the Holy Spirit to draw people to Himself in His own time. This woman, who's enjoyed Canadian friendships, recently said, "One of the best things about coming to Canada is how it has changed the way she thinks about spirituality and Jesus." So this is a huge step in a positive direction. We discovered that this strategy, this pathway that begins with helping immigrants settle well, is effective for producing spiritual conversations. We're trying to make friends so we can have real dialogue. Of course, we want them to learn about Jesus, but we begin by showing them Christ's love through settlement assistance and friendship. Churches provide love and community that is incredibly appealing, especially for new immigrants looking for social connections. We regularly ask ourselves, how can we serve new Canadians in our neighborhood who we've never met before? What needs do they have? What resources do we have at our church that could be used to serve new Canadians to help them with their transition to life in Canada? What skills and interests do people of our church have that they could share with others? All they have to do is do that activity, okay? If you instead of going cross-country skiing, say, "Hey, I'm going cross-country skiing. Anybody want to go with me?" We know that when we welcome and serve new Canadians in this way, we become friends and they begin their own pathway to Jesus. A few years ago, my family had a double-decker bus tour in Edinburgh. The tour guide pointed out an old church building that was now a tavern, and he commented on how this was a much better use of the property. That's the building right there. And honestly, I felt so hurt when he said that. I love the church. I love meeting with God's people. And I started thinking, well, what does a church have to do so that people in the community would miss the church if it was no longer there? So settlement classes and I know your church, I'm sure your churches are doing things so that people in the community will miss it if it's not there. Settlement classes for immigrants are one of the things our church does to make an impact in our neighborhood. It's one of the ways we serve others and show the love of Jesus. At our church, we've tried to develop a ministry that focuses on both evangelism and social action. The settlement classes are primarily about social transformation. It allows us various ways to show our love for neighbors in ways that help them settle here in Canada. As we get to know students, we learn about the problems they face as they settle in Canada. So the second stage on the pathway is the transitional programming. It's the ESL Bridges class. The class bridges the gap between settlement classes and events, stage 1, and spiritual classes, stage 3. The class focuses on English language, Canadian culture, and the life and teaching of Jesus. It can be difficult for a newcomer to make the transition from an ESL class or farm trip or one of my favorites, line dancing, to a spiritual conversation that could be found in an ESL Bible study or Alpha. The Bridges class helps to fill that gap. So we believe God gave us the idea for the Bridges class to address the spiritual curiosity of immigrants. Those that come they're usually not interested in becoming followers of Jesus, at least not yet, but they're curious about Christianity or about Jesus. From a Christian point of view, the Bridges class does not focus on evangelism. The Bridges class is definitely pre-evangelistic. People from various faiths, including atheists, learn about the life and teaching of Jesus while studying English language and Canadian culture. So immigrants learn about the gospel in a most gentle and respectful way. In every Bible study I've been to, the goal is to understand the Bible, and that's a great goal. But in this class, we use the life and teaching of Jesus to generate discussion questions for newcomers to talk about their own lives. We encourage students to talk about their birth country, their childhood experiences, their immigrant experience, their values, hopes, dreams, their successes, and then as we get to know each other, even failures. We often ask questions that are an invitation to vulnerability. We have found that when this invitation is accepted, we get to know each other very quickly. New Canadians learn English while at the same time building friendships with fellow students and loving church volunteers. So here's an example. In Matthew 1, the angel told Joseph to name the baby Jesus because he will save his people from their sins. So we ask questions like, how are people named in your birth country? Or the name Jesus means save or deliver. Tell us the meaning of your child's name. We like to ask a gentle spiritual question each week. So one week we were looking at forgive your brother 77 times, and we asked, tell us about a time when you forgave someone or someone forgave you. We try to ask questions that engage our students to talk about their values, feelings, and opinions, and it leads to natural and comfortable spiritual conversations. Another example is from Luke 1. The angel appears to Zechariah, and we ask questions like, well, children sometimes disobey their parents. In what ways did you disobey your parents? Or, Zechariah and Elizabeth were both old when the angel appeared to them. In your opinion, what's a good age to have children? The angel Gabriel had good news for Zechariah. What good news did you get this past week? What good news would you like to hear next week? And for sure, people want to answer that. When does anyone ever ask a new Canadian a question like that? And then the gentle spiritual question, Elizabeth said, the Lord has done this for me. What is something that God has done for you? So we're inviting students to think about how God might change their life. We're looking at John 2, where Jesus turns the water to wine. So we ask questions like, what are the components or parts of a wedding in your birth country? What food is served at a wedding? What are the various roles or jobs people have? Verse 10 refers to those who've had too much to drink. What are the effects of drinking too much? How would your life be different if you could change water into wine? So that's where we get all the comedians. They have something to say about that one. Most think of it in terms of the monetary advantage. And then the gentle spiritual question. These verses in John tell us the story of Jesus' first miracle. What miracle would you like Jesus to do for you? Muslims and Buddhists will answer a question like this. Atheists often have no idea what to do with this kind of question. I've been sitting at a small group, I'm at a table, and there's like 3 or 4, and I'll ask a question like this, and it's like the tumbleweeds are blowing across the mesa, and I can hear, a wolf howling. Like no one knows what to do with it. But what happens is they're learning English, they're having fun, they're making friends, so they're likely to come back, and they might even invite a friend. As our students participate in these classes, month after month, many start saying things like, I'm not a Christian but, or if I was a Christian, or they say prayer words or God words, and we know the Spirit of God is moving in their hearts. One day we looked at Luke 10, in which the expert in the law wanted to justify himself, asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? So we asked the question, when do people try to justify themselves? When do they try to defend their words or actions? And we followed that up. We pushed it a little further. How do people justify themselves and we tried to think of specific examples, when they're stopped by a police officer for a ticket or fail a school examination? So I was fascinated by the answers we received. 2 men have been attending our classes for a good length of time, but they're often very reserved and cautious in what they say. But in response to this question, both started to talk about how they tried to justify their own actions before receiving a fine from a police officer. One man, he tried to defend himself by saying he hadn't been able to renew his car registration because he'd been traveling back to his birth country to visit his family. And the Canadian police officer, smiled and then gave him a ticket for $240. One man honestly talked about a time when he failed an exam at a prestigious university in his birth country and was trying to explain himself to his parents. It's like these invitations to vulnerability. It's amazing when they're accepted. These questions invite honesty. When we speak honestly about ourselves and express our own vulnerability, our new Canadian friends respond in a similar manner. Over time, we're able to have comfortable and natural spiritual conversations. So in the settlement classes and events, there's a huge focus on students becoming part of a community. Many students have told us that people in these classes are their family. So some immigrants, they have no friends, they have no connections, no network, no one to help them when they have a question or problem with their car or their hot water tank or something their kids are facing at school. So our settlement classes can be a place where students belong before coming to belief in Christ. Our Bridges class combines belonging and believing. Though the focus is pre-evangelistic, many come to faith through the witness of our church volunteers and the words and life of Jesus that we read each week. Friendships grow, and our new Canadian friends move along a pathway to Jesus. One woman who immigrated from West Asia was very motivated to learn English, and I'm going to call her Brenda. She was preparing for a professional exam and had a time limit. She wanted to get her TOEFL score higher so she could qualify for the exam. So she enrolled in every class we had at our church, but in addition, she was registered in classes in at least 3 other churches that we know of, and that's great. She was taking classes at all 3 stages of her pathway, and over the course of about 6 months, it became clear Brenda had become a follower of Jesus. And then she invited her husband, Charlie, to join her for the Alpha course. Every week, we discussed things like, who is Jesus? Why did Jesus die? Is the Bible reliable? And one day, Charlie said to me, he said, I really like the way you answer the questions. You always give an unbiased answer. I think Charlie said that because we always try to be as honest as we can about all the mistakes the church has made in the past. We want to make it clear. We're not trying to justify or defend violence perpetrated by Christians. To admit the church has often ignored Jesus' teaching about love and forgiveness. And to be honest, we were surprised, but very pleased at how quickly Charlie joined his wife and became a follower of Jesus. Charlie and Brenda asked if they could have a private baptism because they didn't want their family in their birth country to be affected by their choices in North America. So this couple continues to mature in faith as part of a small group. They meet regularly for prayer, Bible study, and fellowship, and they've even invited friends from their birth country who live in Calgary to join them at some of the classes. The third stage of the pathway is the spiritual classes. This is what, it's for those who want to follow Jesus. Or they're close to faith, or they're new to faith. This is what churches are good at. Sometimes they need help with the ESL component. So we invite students to participate in ESL Bible studies, a baptism class, Alpha, church worship service, and small groups. Our new Canadian friends ask heartfelt and profound questions, and we pray for each other's physical and spiritual needs. I lead an ESL Bible study on Saturday evenings. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to miss tonight, but someone else is taking my place. One fall day, I was talking with one of the students named Emma, and she told me, today I became a Christian. And she'd participated in our Holy Spirit weekend. One of the pastors had prayed with her to receive Christ. So our friend Aaron, he became a follower of Jesus the previous November, and he was about to be baptized. So he had questions about it. So I asked him and Emma and the rest of the class to observe a baptism service. After the baptisms, I asked my immigrant friends if they had questions about baptism. One student, Olivia, had been going back and forth for quite a few months, trying to decide whether or not she should also become a follower of Jesus. So she asked Aaron all sorts of questions. They came from the same culture, same background, same language. And Aaron was able to tell what he knew, and he was baptized the next day. So eventually, Olivia became a follower of Jesus, and she and her husband were baptized just under a year ago, last February. Another immigrant named Michelle was a volunteer for 7 years before she decided to become a follower of Jesus, and she was baptized soon after. One of our students is named Kathy, and she came to faith after attending class. She went to Alpha 4 times. Like many go to the Alpha for the food and to learn English, but for the 4th time, finally she understood, and she decided to follow Jesus. Well, Kathy was divorced from her husband, But her ex-husband remarried, and the new wife is now a strong believer, and her daughter, Julie, became a follower of Jesus and was baptized. So we don't receive this kind of spiritual encouragement all the time, but we're so thankful to God for the work he's doing in the lives of our immigrant friends. So in the past 16 years, we've seen hundreds of our immigrant neighbors progress along a pathway to Jesus. Dozens of those have been baptized. Many join church small groups. They volunteer. They bring their children to Sunday school. They attend worship services. We found that on average, for every 10 who attend settlement classes, 4 or 5 will come to the Stage 2 ESL Bridges class, and about half of those, 2 or 3, will go into the spiritual classes. This past fall, September, we restarted our in-person classes. During COVID, our numbers have been going down, and we're so glad we could restart. We decided to keep some of our online classes because we didn't want to lose some of those students who are farther away. We're so thankful to God that this transition has been working. So at our church, at the settlement level, we usually have about 170 we averaged last fall, 50 to 60 at Bridges, and the Stage 2, and then Stage 3, about 25 to 30. So it's not quite the numbers I showed you before, but we're hopeful that we can raise up the numbers in Stage 2 and Stage 3. So what we try to focus on is increasing the variety of classes and the opportunities at the Stage 1, because we know the more people who come to Stage 1 classes, the more who will be on a pathway, moving to Stage 2, then to Stage 3, the Bible studies, and to baptisms. In the last 8 years, we've seen that this 3-stage model works really well in churches as small as 25 and much larger than 5,000. Some churches aren't sure how to begin this ministry, so we encourage them to start with a Stage 1 class. ESL conversation class is easy to do. All you need is volunteers who are friendly, smile, and most important, listen. They have to be able to listen. And then churches select curriculum, they get a few volunteers, they plan for the first class, and they start advertising. In the first few months, start a party, start meeting families, and then when everything's going well, say 6 months, 12 months in, then think about a Stage 2 class for the spiritually curious. And if you have any questions, I'd like to, you can talk to me at my table afterwards, but we have time for some questions as we end today. So let's see here. These are some questions people often ask. What class should we start with? What steps should we need to follow to offer an online class? How do we advertise? How can we prepare volunteers? How do we troubleshoot? And my wife and I have been doing this for 16 and a half years. We've made every mistake there is to make. So you can come ask us, and we can help you avoid many of the mistakes we've made. Okay, so let's anyone have any questions? Nils has...
I've got a microphone here.
Yeah.
I'll pass on to if you have any questions, and if you're online, just type them into the chat on YouTube, and I'll try and feed them to Rick.
I'm wondering about how forthcoming you are about what Stage 2 and Stage 3 entail.
Oh yeah, we're absolutely forthcoming.
Right from
we have nothing to hide.
the first lesson they come to in Stage 1? Is it a matter of, here's the stages we want you to...
It's not like we tell them everything, but it's like, well, we only advertise our Stage 1 classes. And then when people come to Stage 1, we start advertising our Stage 2 and Stage 3. So what we love about the strategy is we're not hiding anything. Because we never advertise, we never do like, okay, come to this ESL conversation class, oh, and it's a Bible study. We never do that because we want our new Canadian friends to trust us. Because when they trust us, they're more likely to come back and to bring their friends. And so when we advertise Stage 2 or Stage 3, we always say, you know, it's Canadian culture, English language, and the life of Jesus. We always make sure that they know what they're going to get. So there's no surprises. And then at the back.
Hi, I'm just wondering, what does an ESL program look like practically for a rural community?
Yeah, so it just depends on who's in your community, right? So many small towns will have new Canadians who are working at Timmy's or A&W, but obviously in some rural communities there are no people to teach, right? So it just depends your location. Did I answer your question? Yeah. These lights are really bright. Sound guy, is it okay if I move forward a little? Yeah. Okay, now I can see people.
Do you have any stats on international students in Winnipeg?
No. I did look up Ukrainian evacuees coming, and the most recent number I could get was like 12,500, but that's from November, so it's got to be higher. So there's lots of Ukrainians coming to Winnipeg. So if there's no other questions, I guess we can end. Thanks so much for coming today, and if we can help in any way, just let us know. Blessings on everyone.